Speaking of benefits, I'm Kevin Long with Employee Benefits Law Group, and I'm here today with my partner Marcel Weiland. Now, many employers assume that retirement plans have to treat everyone the same, but the coverage rules really don't work that way. Today, we'll lay the foundation for how coverage rules and non-discrimination rules fit together, why the highly compensated employee and non-highly compensated employee distinction drives testing outcomes, what it means for an employee to, quote, benefit, and how exclusions can quietly create compliance trouble, even in a well-intentioned plan design. So, Marcel, based upon your deep experience, many employers assume retirement plans must treat everybody the same. Why is that assumption wrong under the coverage rules?
Well, Kevin, the coverage rules actually do allow plan sponsors to discriminate between different groups of employees within certain limits. And that's the key is what are those limits and how much wiggle room the employer actually has.
But what you're saying is that they allow you to discriminate against highly compensated employees and not non-highly compensated employees.
Well, you can discriminate against non-highly compensated employees, but within certain limits. So you can give a certain level of benefits, more benefits to highlies compared to non-highlies, as long as you stay within certain parameters.
Okay, as long as you're good enough. So, how do the coverage rules and non-discrimination rules actually work together in practice?
Well, the coverage rules really define what populations of employees must receive a benefit under the plan and come into play in that particular testing. And the non-discrimination rules define how much of a difference there can be in the level of benefits provided to non-highly compensated employees versus highlies.
Okay, so why is the HCE versus NHCE distinction the foundation for every testing outcome?
Well, Congress drafted the relevant statutes here to strike a deal with employers. Congress said, we're going to give you these tax deductions for contributions made to qualified retirement plans. In exchange for those deductions, you're going to have to provide a baseline level of benefits to non-highly compensated employees. You can't just jack all the benefits into the accounts of highly compensated. So you want the deductions, you're going to have to give it to some non-highlies.
Right. Good. Excellent. I think that's a great explanation. Now, you talk about benefiting employees. Why is that concept so central to coverage analysis?
Well, the coverage test measures the percentage of non-highly compensated employees receiving a benefit versus the percentage of highly compensated employees receiving a benefit. So that's the crux of it. Who you're comparing who's benefiting as an HCE, who's benefiting as an NHCE.
Mm, okay. Now, with all that said, when do statutory versus non-statutory exclusions become a hidden source of compliance trouble?
Well, when plan sponsors exclude too many non-statutorily excluded employees, like certain groups of employees from a certain location or certain hourly employees, that can be a problem. On the flip side, if the employer is including in the testing both statutorily excluded employees and non-statutorily excluded employees, rather than testing them separately, that's another opportunity for compliance trouble.
So would you say that in a lot of cases you see that based upon how companies operate their businesses and how they classify their employees? You mentioned hourlies and different locations and maybe different entities. Do you see it a lot?
Yeah, we do see it quite a bit. Different groups of employees, if they're not statutorily excluded, employers will often exclude them or give them a different level of benefits. And that
Mhm.
is where it can run into problems if you're testing. The statutorily excluded employees are those who like are agent service requirements or they're belonging to a union. And you can statutorily exclude those people who haven't met agent service without having it be a testing problem. But it's when those groups of hourly employees or employees at a certain location that aren't excluded under statute, then that's when you can run into these issues.
Right. Sounds like, like we said, a pretty common situation, given that business owners will, in operation, look at their employee base, in different manners. So coverage isn't just compliance, it's a blueprint for lawful and flexible plan design. So the takeaway is that the ratio test isn't just a pass-fail, it's a design dashboard. Now, we've thrown a lot at you today, and thanks, Marcel, for keeping it as succinct as possible. But Marcel has done a really good job of laying this out in a more detailed article. Click the link or look for it on our website and get a broader, plain English explanation of what's going on in testing. If you need specific guidance on this topic, let's start a conversation. Now for the fine print. This podcast is for general purposes only. It does not create an attorney-client relationship between Employee Benefits Law Group and the listener or reader, and it does not constitute legal advice for a specific situation.